So in a recent Discord question, it was asked whether within Resolve we could create this sort of plasma text effect thing, and ever want to rise to a challenge. I did it. In this tutorial, I'm going to take you as far as producing the text. The reflection is from a tutorial by Wipp, which I will link in the description. I highly recommend you watch the whole tutorial, but the reflection part is from about 11 minutes onwards. Okay, so let's get into it. As per usual, we're going to be working in Fusion, so you need to find your Fusion composition. Generally, make sure your effects library is turned on. Come to Effects and Fusion Composite at the top. If you've watched my videos before, I keep telling you to click this little star button and it puts your Fusion Comp at the bottom here in Favorites, which just makes it easier to find from wherever you are. Right click your Fusion Comp, change clip duration. I think I had it at 15 seconds. And into Fusion. Okay, so the first part is relatively easy. Bring in your text node and set it up however you want it. Okay, once you've got your text set up as you want it, first thing we need to do is prepare for later on. And what I mean by that is we're going to need an SVG version of our text. So at this stage, we can still make changes, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily merge this onto a black background to give us this image. After this stage, you cannot change your text, so you need to make sure that you've got it set up exactly as you want it. So with your black background, right click, go to Save Image, and you need to save it as a PNG file and call it what you want. Find somewhere to save so that it's easy to get to and hit save. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that PNG image, we're going to bring it into some sort of SVG to PNG converter, or PNG to SVG converter should I say. So we will get our image, we'll bring it in, do the convert bit, download it back to where we can find it, and come back to Fusion. Now if we come to the Fusion menu at the top, import SVG, and look for our newly created SVG. We want it to be the same resolution as our timeline or Fusion comp, which is 1920 by 1080. So if you hit 1920 and then tab, it should automatically set the 1080 for you, and hit OK. So this is our text, but as an SVG. What an SVG is basically lots of paths, and that's what we need, because although we can outline text in Fusion, we can't then animate the outline, but we can animate these paths. So we will just close that up, move it over here for the time being. So back to our main text. We can now get rid of our background and our merge and put our main text back in the viewer. We're going to use this text to create the sort of wavy, plasma-y lines in the background. To do that, we're going to select our text node, we're going to come to the inspector, go to the shading tab, and we're going to come to appearance and just click the outline option like so, and it changes our text into an outline. You can leave the thickness where it is, or you can adjust it if you would rather. We'll see how it goes as we're sort of making it. So with our outline text, we're going to need to displace that. So Shift Spacebar will bring up the tool selection dialog and type displace. and bring it in. So we've now got our text going to this displace node. Nothing happens at the minute because there's nothing driving the displace. So to drive the displace, we're going to bring in a fast noise of the hotbar. Put the fast noise in your viewer and tweak some of the settings so that you've got a bit of contrast, and then increase the scale. Now if we pipe this into the green input of the displace and view the displace, you can see our text is starting to wobble. If we come to our fast noise and add some seed rate, you get this effect. Select the displace node, change type to XY, and now it's just about playing with these settings to get something like the look that you're after. I wouldn't go overly mad. What you can do is increase your seed rate so that it's happening faster. Again, this is going to be trial and error. Like so. So once you've got one going, we can just duplicate this. So take your fast noise in your displace, Command C or Control C, Command or Control V to copy it. Take a second output from your text into this new displace, and it's exactly the same. So come into your fast noise and go to the seethe wheel and just change the seethe. And now if we merge them both together, the two displaces, and view that, you get that going on. And if you want to add a third, you can do. It's up to you. To add some color, come back to your text node, go to your color and pick whatever color you want your jiggly lines to be. And then after your merge node, you can add maybe a soft glow, like so. And then you can tweak this to be how you want it to be. So there's your jiggly text. Just as a test to sort of see where it is positionally, click your text node, Control C to copy, click away, Control V to paste it. Just set this back to white and make it solid again. And then if you merge that on top of your jiggly text, you can see that our jiggly text is sort of slightly down and to the left. So if you come into your displace nodes and just tweak the offsets so that it's kind of going more around the text, like so. And do the same for your other one. So now you've got your jiggly text going a bit more around, so we can get rid of those now, you don't need them. Okay, so that's kind of the relatively easy part out of the way. We might come back and tweak sort of colors and sort of brightness and stuff on this later on, but we'll see how it sort of pans out. Okay, so now for the fun bit, the animations. So as I said earlier, we've got this group that we call plasma that is basically all our paths for our letters. If we put that in, we end up with this. So if we ungroup this and then bring it down so it's not getting in the way of anything else, first thing we can do is get rid of the backgrounds because we don't need them, or the merges, like so. Now each of these will be a path of one of our letters. So if we bring it into the viewer, so we've got like S is this one, the next one is the P, etc. And they're just outlines, they're paths that we can edit and animate. So what we need to do first is get rid of this top one, because that's just the white sort of outline or the main border. So get rid of it, we don't need it. We need to come down and rename each of these so that it makes sense as to what they are. So we can see this one's the S, for example. Select the node, press F2 to rename it, and rename it, and work through and rename all the others. Once you've renamed them, you can stack them in the right order. Like so. So you've got each letter in the right order, just chain them all together. We're going to need 2 copies of this column of letters, one for the particle system and one for the line that the particles draw. So select all your nodes, Control or Command C, click away, Control or Command V, to paste the second copy. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this out of the way for a minute, because otherwise I'm going to keep running into it. Just rip it up. Okay. So we'll concentrate on the particles first, which is going to be this left-hand column. The way the particles work is we're going to make each of these into an outline. The outline will then drive the particles. So to get the outline, the first thing we need is a background node. Bring that in and take the output of your last letter in the chain into the background and pop it up onto the screen. You can change your background to whatever color you want your text or your particles to be. Sort of orangey yellow. Now we need to work our way through each of our letters and set them up. So the first one, come to the inspector, uncheck solid and set border width to 0.005, like so, and then work down the line doing that for all of them. Now we're going to work on one letter at a time, just to stop your head getting messed up. If you select all the other letters, so I'm going to work on the P first, select all your other letters and press Control and P. It just turns off the nodes while we're not working on them. It just makes it a bit easier to concentrate on what we're doing. So we want this line to become a trail of particles. So the first thing we need to do is set up our particles. It's a very basic, simple particle system. So come to your hotbar. You want particle emitter, so P emitter and P renderer. You just join them together. Select your P renderer, come to the inspector and change output mode to 2D. Now we need this background to go into this P emitter, but at the minute there's no input for it. So select your P emitter, come to region, and where it's a sphere at the top, change that to bitmap. This now adds an input that we can use, and we simply drag our background into that. So now if we view our P emitter, you can just make out the particles in the shape of your P. Okay, so how do we get from this to our line of particles going round? What we need to do is we need to animate the path from our P. So at the minute it's just a solid outline. So what we need to do is use the length and the position sliders in the inspector to animate this. Bring your playhead back to frame 0. Come to your inspector, keyframe length and drop it to 0. Keyframe position and leave it at 0. Now each letter is going to take 5 seconds for the particles to go round twice and for the line to be drawn. So for me, I'm on a 30 frame per second timeline, so that's 150 frames. So come to frame 150 and we are going to come to position. We're not going to use the slider because the slider only goes up to 1 and we want 2. So double click in the box and just add 2. Now our length, we need our length to come in a few frames, so it needs to grow to the appropriate length and then stay at that length till the end and then fade down again. I don't think I said that very well. You'll see what I'm doing. Come back to frame 0. You're concentrating on length. Come forward maybe 15 frames and then put your length to 0.5. This value is not mandatory and we can tweak it depending on how long the line looks. Looking at that, we can probably go down a bit. It's a bit long, I think. So maybe come down to 0.4-ish. Play about, get the line the length you want it. We'll go with 0.4. And then come about 10 frames back. So frame 140. Again, set this to 0.4. So keyframe it at 0.4. And then come to 150 and drop it back down to 0. So your line basically starts at 0, grows as it comes around, stays at that length for a couple of cycles, and then shrinks back down at the end. So this is going to be our particles. So now if we come to our renderer and view that, what you've got, although you can barely see it, is your particles coming round. So what we need to do is up our number of particles. So come to P emitter, come to controls and set the number to about 150. Now what you need to do is not have them form a solid letter, but we need them to form a trail. So to do that, just come to the lifespan and drop that down until you start to get a trail. So about 10 frames. So each particle will live for 10 frames and then disappear, and you end up with your particle line. Like so. Now the next thing we want is for these particles to be the right color. So again, come to P emitter, because we've set our color in our background. So come to P emitter, go to controls, where you've got color, just change that to use color from region. So now our particles will be the same color as our line. After your P render, you can add a glow or a soft glow, maybe. Let's go with soft glow. So your particles have got a bit of a glow to them. And again, you can tweak your settings. So we've now got our particle trail. Now we need to think about the letter, the outline letter that we will be having. So we come to our second column, and what you need to do is again set up these letters. So select your first letter, uncheck solid, go with 005 again, and you also want a bit of soft edge on that, but not too much, just so that it sort of softens back a bit. And then you need to again do this for your other letters. So now we've got all our letters set up, we need to color them. So select a background node, bring it in, change your background node to whatever color you want your solid line to be, and then pipe your text into the mask input of the background, like so. Again, as with our particle text, I'm going to work on this one letter at a time. So we've done the P for our particles, so we'll do the P for our line. So select all your other letters for a minute, Control and P to disable them so that you're just left with your P. Okay, so select your second P, so your line P, and the animation is basically going to be the letter isn't visible for the first 2.5 seconds of your 5 seconds. So come to frame 0, keyframe length, drop it down to 0, come to 2.5 seconds, which is 75 frames for me. Keyframe at 0 again, and then come to frame 150 and keyframe to 1. So now if we take the output of our soft glow and put it on top of the background from our solid line letters, so that the particles are on top in the green input and the solid line letter is in the yellow background input, and play through, viewing the merge node would be quite helpful. What we get is our particle outline goes around once, and on the second go round it's pulling our letter with it. So we'll now do the same for the cutout of the P. So select your second letter and just Control P to activate them both. Now this is going to have the same animation as the sort of first one. So what we can do is we had keyframes at 0, 15, 40 and 150. So select your second path, come to frame 0, keyframe length and position, come to frame 15, keyframe length, come to frame 140, keyframe length, and then come to frame 150 and keyframe length and position. So going back through the keyframes, at frame 0, length will be 0. At frame 15, length will be 0.4. In fact, for this bit, it could probably even get away with being a lot less than 0.4. And we'll see. No, we'll stick with 0.4. At frame 140, frame 141, but it doesn't matter. Just go back. No, stop. Come to frame 140. At frame 140, we're still at 0.4. And then at frame 150, you're at 0. So your particle, although you can barely see it, is going round. So what we need to do is our line. So again, select our line column, frame 0, keyframe length at 0, frame 75, which is 2.5 seconds, keyframe length at 0, and then frame 150, keyframe length at 1. So now we have our particles doing their thing once, and then on the second time round the particles are pulling our line with them, like so. And now it's basically a case of rinse and repeat. What I'll do is I'll show you the L, and after the L I'll whiz through it. I'll sort of speed it up, otherwise this video is going to take about 5 hours. I think it's going to be long enough as it is. So coming back to our second letter, so L, again select Command P to reactivate them. Our particle L is going to have the same animation as our P, but it's going to be offset. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the L 10 frames after the P. So if you come to frame 10, select the particle L, keyframe length at 0. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to change the position slightly. So come to position, set it to 0.1 and keyframe it. Now come forward 15 frames, so 25, and set your length to 0.4. Now come to frame 160, add a keyframe on length, and add a keyframe on position, and change position to 2.1. So it's still going 2 revolutions. And then just come back 10 frames to 150. Keyframe length, go back to 160 and drop the length to 0. Now come to your line L. Again, we've moved forward 10 frames, so do the same. Go to frame 10, keyframe length at 0. Remember, our position has changed, so we need to match positions, but we don't need to animate it, so position 0.1. Then come to frame 160. No, come to frame 85 first. Keyframe length again at 0. Then come to frame 160. And keyframe length to 1. So now we've got 2 letters, he says, hopefully. Like so. Particles really slow the system down. So you then work through all your other letters, offsetting them by 10 frames as you go along, and offsetting the start position by 0.1 each time. So coming to the A, or the first A, it will start at frame 20, have 150 frame or 5-second animation, and the position will be 0.2 because we had 0 for the P, 0.1 for the L, and now 0.2 for the A. As I say, I'm going to go through and do all the others, but that will be speeded up. Okay, so we've kind of got this effect going on. So each particle is slightly delayed from the one previous, and so each line will also be slightly delayed. Now what you notice is that once all your letters are being worked on, the particle density gets much lower. The reason for that being is that when it's just the P, then all 150 particles that we're firing here are going to this line. However, as more particle lines are being drawn, then this same 150 particles is having to be shared between them all, so the density drops. So what I did was I basically came to frame 0, select your particle emitter, keyframe this 150, come to about 5 seconds in, so about frame 150, and again you can play with these values to see what works best, and by 150 knock your number of particles up to 500, then come to about 300, keyframe at 500, and then come to the end and drop it back down to 150. So what that does is, for the duration where you've got more letters being drawn, you've also got more particles being spawned. So you end up with your particles being a bit clearer. You could possibly get away with even more than 500. Try 750. Yeah, so your particle trails are a bit clearer now. And that is basically the particle effect. As I say, lots of particles, lots of lines getting drawn. It kind of chugs and slows the system down a bit, unfortunately. We will be able to sort of cache it on the render, on the edit tab. So what we'll do is, if we just bring down this chunk here, which was our original wobbly text. Now, if we take the output from our particles and lines and merge it on top of our wobbly text and view that, you now have this kind of thing going on. So what we'll do is we will go back to the edit tab and give this a minute. It's going to take a little while to cache, but we'll get there. So I think what I would do is I would go back in, I would maybe drop the brightness of the wiggly text a bit. I would possibly increase the number of particles. These are all things that you will play with to get the sort of best look. So if we come to our P emitter and have our original particles, say start at 300, come back to 300 at the end, see what that looks like. Yeah, it gives a bit of a stronger. As I say, you need to play around with how things are. Your text color you can probably mute down a bit. You get the idea. It's the settings, just jiggle around with them, get kind of the look you want. But that's the basic idea. That's how you got the sort of wiggly text. I think, as I said at the beginning, I'm not going to go into the reflection. I'll link Jake's video in the description. It's a really good video. It will give you another effect to work with. It's a nice glitch title effect. But from about 11 minutes into the video, if you replace his glitch setup with this text setup that we've just built, the process is exactly the same. So where Jake takes the output from his glitch system, you're taking the output from this merge here, and that will go into image planes and into a 3D scene. But I'll let Jake tell you all about that. He does it better than I do. I hope that makes sense for you. As I say, this is the basic sort of setup that I had with the introduction. Other than, obviously, I'd sort of stuck it into a 3D scene, I'd added reflections to it, etc. Any questions, post them below, or I hang out on various sort of Discord servers related to Davinci Resolve, Jake Wipp server, Mr. Alex Tech server, various AMV servers. So I'm usually around. Hunt me out. I'm sure you'll find me. Any questions, just shout, and I will catch you on the next one. Oh yeah, do the whole like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell thing, please.